Hi, my name is Joshua Zeiber, editor of the Video File Movie and Home Theater blog. Welcome to Film at 11, the podcast where I introduce my children to famous movies they've never seen. Joining me this week is my 11-year-old son, Joseph.
Hi.
Of my two 11-year-old sons that I have on this podcast, Joseph is the one who has watched movies including E.T., The Sandlot, and Big, and others. Please go back and check out those episodes if you missed them. This week's episode is dedicated to our friend Patrick, who recommended to us that he would like us to review The NeverEnding Story, the 1984 fantasy adventure about a kid who really likes to read very long books. Joseph, do you know anything about this movie? Have you ever even seen the pictures of these characters or weird things on the cover art there?
No.
No. Okay, good. It's always good to start from a place of knowing absolutely nothing about a movie. So, we're going to watch The NeverEnding Story. Let's get this story started. Talk about false advertising. We just watched a movie called The NeverEnding Story, and here we are, barely 2 hours later, and guess what? The movie ended. Yeah, it's over. Joseph, I often make you watch movies from the 1980s for this podcast. As I've talked about before, that's when I grew up. That's when I fell in love with movies, and I want to share a lot of those movies with you. This may be one of the most 1980s of 1980s movies that we've watched together. By that, I'm referring to things like the theme song and the special effects, which definitely look and sound their age. They certainly have their charm, but yeah, they're a bit dated. So Joseph, what were your thoughts on this movie as we start off here?
I liked it.
Okay, but I noticed that when the theme song was playing at the very beginning, you told me you were vibing to it. Yeah.
Yeah.
What about? I mean, how did you feel about some of the creature effects? Which were very obviously animatronics and puppets and whatnot.
Yeah.
Did that bother you, or were you into the movie at that
I
point?
liked it.
Okay. What notes did you take on this movie? Because I wanted you to have at least three things to talk about.
Okay, so I was wondering, why did he take the book when he was explicitly told not to?
That's a good question. Yeah, this movie has some messages that are a little dubious. For example, this movie basically says that it's totally cool to steal books from bookstores and to skip school and to stay out all night without telling your dad where you went. Mm-hmm. Those things are not good. Yeah. Don't do any of those things. Don't steal, don't skip school, and really, don't stay out like in a strange place all night and not tell anyone. That's problematic. People are worried. Mm-hmm. What else you got?
I was wondering why he stayed in school when he could have just taken the book home.
That's true. I was thinking about that as well. Why didn't he just take this book home at that point? I'm thinking he was afraid that his father would be mad at him about stealing the book.
Yeah.
Whether his father would know that he stole the book or not, or just think it was a book he got at the library, I don't have an answer for that. But I'm thinking, yeah, he was worried that his father would be mad at him, maybe. Yeah. There's also, the fact that he was Bastian, the main character who was reading the story, was kind of sad about a lot of things, and he may not have wanted to go home at that point.
Yeah.
All right. What was your last one?
I didn't like the scene when the horse died.
When the horse died, yes. So this movie does have, on its surface, this movie is a fantasy story about magical creatures in a fantasy land, literally called Fantasia. And it has a lot of wild, outrageous things and magic and flying animals and flying dog animals, I should say. Dogs. What would you call him? I mean,
a dog lizard.
Yeah, I mean, he's called a luck dragon in the movie, but yeah, he's part
like
dog, part lizard, and then he flies.
And then he's pink and fuzzy.
Yeah.
And he has Pearl's skills.
Right. Yeah. That was a little weird. So it's about a lot of weird stuff there, and there's a lot in this movie that felt like it came straight out of Alice in Wonderland. You know,
Yeah.
like especially the snail, the racing snail, and some other things. I felt like some of those characters really feel like they just stepped right out of Alice in Wonderland. But that's all the stuff that was going on the surface. Beneath the surface, this movie does have some darker subject matter. As you mentioned, spoiler alert for those who haven't seen it in years. The one of the characters' horse dies in a very like wrenching manner that's very sad. And the other thing is that the subtext for this movie is that the whole story is about this kid Bastian reading the book, who he's having a rough time because his mother passed away, and he's having to cope with that, and he's having a really hard time coping with that. So this movie does actually have deeper meanings, deeper levels to it than are apparent at first. But I think that's probably one of the reasons why it has sort of held up, and why a lot of people really love this movie is because it has, it's got the silly fantasy stuff on one surface, on one level, and then it's got the deeper meaning afterwards. And it's a pretty complex story as well, in that it's got the fantasy characters who are the creation and the imagination of the main boy who's reading the story, and then we learn at the end that they acknowledge that people are watching Bastian's story as well, that he's a fictional character too. Like, the movie is it's a very meta movie on a number of levels. It's got the at least 3 levels there, and then that makes you question: is someone watching us?
Yeah.
I hope not. Please don't spy on me. Joseph, what were there any aspects of this movie you didn't like, other than the horse dying, of course?
I didn't like how they didn't really show the nothing too much, and
Right.
yeah, and I felt like that it was more of a storm than it was nothing.
Yeah, a part of that I think is just the inability of 1980s special effects to convey that. It was just a lot of smoke, basically.
Yeah.
And clouds. But it's also, I think, the idea of nothing being the problem is a hard concept to visualize.
Yeah.
It's nothing. There's nothing to show. It's just not there. So I think that's a pretty hard idea to visualize. I think overall the movie did a fair job, but it mostly looked like a lot of smoke and fog. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Was there anything else?
No.
Okay. What did you think of the music and the theme song overall? I know you said you were vibing to it at the beginning, but were you still vibing to it at the end, or were you sick of it?
I was vibing a little bit.
A little bit, okay. Yeah, the composer of that song is a guy named Giorgio Moroder, who was famous in the 1970s for doing a lot of disco music, and this was the early 80s, but it's still, there's a lot of disco influence in this, which kind of dates it all the more, because it's an 80s movie that kind of feels like a 70s movie too at times. There are also things that I don't know how much you picked up on this, but the movie was an international production where the actor who played Bastian and I believe the actor who played Atreyu were speaking English on camera, but most of the other background characters were speaking German and then were dubbed into English later. I don't know if you picked up on that, but for some of them it was pretty. Their voices just didn't sound natural. They didn't sound like the voice was coming from the character on screen.
Yeah.
Part of that, I think, maybe is okay in that it plays into the otherworldliness of this fantasy kingdom, but at times it's just weird.
Yeah.
Like the princess, when she was speaking, it didn't really seem like that voice was coming from that little girl.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because this was the director of this movie is a German director, and I think a lot of the background characters were either German or other European actors who were speaking their original languages on set and then were dubbed over later. As there is another version of this movie that exists that's entirely dubbed into German. So Bastian and Atreyu speak German in that version of the movie. let's just get into our ratings. So, on our scale of a W or an L for this podcast, where would you put the NeverEnding Story overall?
I'd put it in mid W.
A mid W. Okay. Well, that's better than some of your scores.
Yeah.
Because you can be a tough critic at times. But a mid W. Okay. Did you have anything else you wanted to talk about?
Not really.
Not really. Okay. Well, the NeverEnding Story may never end, but our story does end, and it's going to end here.
Please keep watching.
If you like this content, like, share, subscribe. Feel free to visit videofileblog.com if you want a grown-up take on movies, and we'll see you next time. Bye.
Bye.
Go ahead. What are you're supposed to do your please subscribe thing, Joseph.
Oh yeah. Please subscribe.
Please subscribe. Okay. We'll see you next time. Bye.
Bye.
Wow, I'm going to have to edit the hell out of that one.
Please subscribe.